Arthur lived alone in the middle of the mountain. He had no children, no partner. His parents had died a few years ago, but he was happy in his own way. The day he wanted to socialize with someone, he would go down to the nearest town. But every day he enjoyed feeling the tranquility of nature and animals. It wasn't uncommon for him to go hunting for a rabbit or wild boar at night. He knew that mountain as if it were his home, and the darkness made it easier for him to hunt. This particular night was darker than usual. The twisted trees and the shadows cast by the moonlight seemed to create the silhouettes of monsters on the road looking for prey to torment. Still, Arthur continued to walk through the woods impassively, guided by his flashlight. Suddenly, he heard a strange noise. He didn't relate it to any known animal. And it wasn't the first time he had wandered out in the dead of night. Nor was it normal to see men around. It was a practically uninhabited area. He changed his usual route and entered a new path, trying to identify the noise. But when he realized it, he was lost. Soon, he heard footsteps coming after him. He grabbed his shotgun and aimed it everywhere, ready to fire. The noises came from behind some bushes. He approached quickly and could see how an animal ran out on all fours. He couldn't see it very well, but he guessed from the creature's cry that it was some wild boar. However, when the creature moved away, he didn't connect the noise of its footsteps in the grass with that of other boars. He was a little confused, but mostly full of curiosity. So without caring about getting lost in the forest anymore, he ran after that creature to get a good look at it. He had to walk a long way until he suddenly stopped when he saw how that creature got up on two legs. He turned to Arthur and showed himself to him in full length. That was not a boar. It was the size of a child, but it wasn't human either. Its eyes were much larger than a man's, and they seemed to be looking at Arthur curiously. Its legs were very thin, and its hands ended in sharp fingers. Its body color was pale gray and contrasted with the hair on its head and part of its body. Arthur didn't know what to do, whether to shoot, whether to flee. The scene was most terrifying. But he was strangely fascinated. He had never seen anything like it. The creature made a sharp sound, the same one that had brought him here. Fearfully, he slowly reached out to touch it, and the creature didn't seem to react. When he was about to touch its head, the being hit him with a strong bite on the hand. The man screamed in pain, while the creature didn't let go. There was a crack, as if the bone had been broken. In fear and despair, Arthur pulled the trigger of his shotgun and fired into the air. Frightened, the animal let go of his hand and backed away. Arthur fell backwards to the ground and saw how a lot of blood spurted from his hand. Looking up again to protect himself, he found that the thing was gone. When several days had passed after what happened and his hand was recovered, Arthur went back into the darkness of the forest. He wanted to meet that strange creature again. He searched for it 3 nights in a row, following the same path he had taken the first time, but found nothing. The following days he tried new paths, getting lost again, but without success. He returned home in the morning totally disappointed. When he was about to give up the search, one night he found something different. On the dry ground, he found several footprints totally different from those he knew. He walked into the darkness following the footsteps until he reached an area where they were increasingly blurred. The ground had many more footprints, as if it were an area traveled by more animals, and the trail he was following could not be clearly distinguished. Arthur didn't even know how many days those footprints had been there. Maybe at the end of his search he wouldn't find anything. But still, he continued. He came to an area he'd never been to, and after so many years walking through the woods, it was hard to surprise him. He came across a large rock wall, and in the center a large opening. The path of footprints seemed to enter that cave. At that moment, a chill ran through his entire body. For the first time, Arthur was beginning to be afraid. He thought that in that cave he could find the animal he was looking for, or a much worse one. It could be the home of a bear or a wolf. He hesitated a few seconds and decided to enter. It was the furthest he had come in all those days. For the first time, there was a clue to follow. He walked in and quickly put his hand to his nose and mouth. Inside that hole was a terrible smell. He raised the flashlight and a few bats fluttered out of that place. The man went on his way. This cave was deeper than he thought, and with each step the smell was more unbearable. At the bottom he saw another hole, but this one was lower and only fit one person. He ducked into it and crawled to the end of the tunnel. That cavity was much more humid and was full of animal droppings. When he got to the other side of the cave, he shined a light and saw what looked like the bodies of sleeping children. They were 3 creatures. They were smaller in size than the one Arthur had seen the first time. Very carefully and silently, he moved a little closer to get a better look at them. They had the same gray fur, but these had some pink spots on their bodies. Suddenly, one of the creatures raised its head. Arthur quickly stepped back, and just as he was about to turn off his flashlight, he realized that these monsters were blind. He decided to stay very still with the flashlight on, and after a few seconds, the creature lay down again and fell asleep. Without moving his feet, he illuminated everything around him. There he could see some skeletons of other animals. They looked like rabbits, wild boars. This meant that those things were carnivorous. For that reason, perhaps the first one had bitten him. He had seen enough. If they woke up, he would be in grave danger, so he decided to leave there, trying to make as little noise as possible. However, when he turned around, he slipped on something slimy on the floor. He banged his head against one of the stone walls, unable to help but groan. He cursed himself and scrambled back up into the hole. Suddenly, he heard that boar-like shriek again. And as he crawled toward the exit, he looked back over his shoulder and saw, horrified, a pair of phosphorescent eyes closing in on him. He scrambled as fast as he could, but soon felt something grab his foot. He pulled very hard on his leg and managed to free himself. He had lost a boot and was panicking madly. He managed to reach the first area of the cave, and when he was about to reach the exit, the creature appeared in a jump in front of him. This time, that thing smiled in a terrifying way. Arthur wanted to escape, but was hit in the face. Right after that, he could see how that monster moved away. Without hesitating for a second, he ran into the forest. His flashlight was dimming. He walked without a boot and could only see with one of his eyes. Desperate, he ran as hard as he could, trying to get out of there. At that moment, the sky made a great rumble and it began to rain heavily. Arthur fell to his knees on the damp ground, clutching his chest, his heart racing. He tried to calm her panic by trying to breathe more gently, but his heart wouldn't obey him. He felt the throbbing in his throat as if the organ wanted to get out of the pressure. As soon as he managed to calm down a bit, he got back on his feet and kept running. The flashlight had completely burned out, and its only light was that of the moon and the lightning that lit up the sky from time to time. Without stopping, he continued to escape. He needed to get out of that dark hell as soon as possible. After a couple of hours, he managed to find his way back home. He entered soaked with water, sweat, and blood, and he lay face up on the ground. He couldn't take in everything that had happened to him. He had been on the brink of death, and he had brought it on himself. When he could, he got up and went to the bathroom to wash his face. It was completely covered in blood. After washing it with water, he realized that he had 3 scratches. One on his forehead, one on his cheek, and one across the eye. He moved closer to the mirror to see himself better. His heart began to beat wildly. His eye was split in 2 with a horizontal line. Days passed. After a hospital admission, his wounds healed, but he lost the vision in his left eye. He promised himself never to go out into the woods alone at night again. He even considered selling his old house and renting another one in the nearest town. The thing had left him traumatized. At night, he woke up with nightmares where those creatures ate him alive. One of those nights, since he couldn't sleep, he pulled a plastic chair outside near the door and sat seeing the rain fall. A few meters away, he saw what looked like an animal skeleton lying on the ground. He went to check it out, and indeed it was. It looked as if someone had dragged him there. There were no such large animals around his house. He knew it had been that creature. Every night the skeletons of animals increased near his house. He decided that the time had come to leave his home. He would never be able to be calm again while those things were still in the forest. He packed his bags and organized a move. Days passed, and Arthur didn't show up to pay the deposit of his new home. Given the lack of response, the authorities were alerted, and they approached his house to check that everything was in order. Upon arrival, the policemen couldn't believe their eyes. Hundreds of animal skeletons surrounded the man's house. The smell of rot was disgusting. They forced the door, and there they found the body of the old hunter, sitting on a chair and with the shotgun in his hand. No one else got to see that thing. Will it still roam our woods?
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you on the next episode.